Hey everybody, welcome to Fable Talk. Today it's just me. I'm talking here by myself, and I'm going to ramble on about a bunch of stuff. Primarily what we're going to talk about is the next few months at Fable's End. So mostly what's on the schedule for us is we have our core sets. We're waiting on one little thing, and then we're hitting go on that, and then we're putting it. Basically, we have to put down a down payment on the manufacturing, and that is the way that our funds are set up is kind of weird. So that's neither here nor there. That's going to happen. We just have to get the paperwork filled out, and then we're good to go. We'll make an announcement when that happens. So core sets are going to be made. We have a lot of other things that are in the manufacturing for our main manufacturing push. One of the things that we'll talk about in probably the next few episodes of Fable Talk, we're going to get into the specifics of how that Kickstarter campaign will be distributed to all of our backers. We will probably make an announcement about where you can put in your information. We have a lot of your information already from Kickstarter. So if you did back us, we are getting to that point where we're going to start putting out some information for you, and then we will get you all set up for your games to be coming in, and then hopefully we will get them before June, which is the goal. Speaking of June, we will be attending a convention in June called Origins in Columbus, Ohio. The dates for that are June 18th to the 22nd in the Greater Columbus Convention Center. We will be there. We will have two booths, actually. We're going to have our normal setup, and then we will also have a booth right next to that where we're going to take up a 10 by 20 space. And we'll be running demos and also selling product, which would be really exciting. We will have our core sets available for people to purchase. We'd really like to do a tournament, and hopefully that tournament would be a constructed tournament, so players can bring decks of their own creation, and they would enter the tournament. There's a lot of things that need to get set up for that, so we will get back to you on how that's going to work out. Regardless of whether or not we have core sets available for people, which we should, there's no reason why we wouldn't, but in the unlikely event due to some kind of tariff hike or trade policy deal that breaks down our delivery date, which is very possible. It's one of the reasons why we're behind is because of the tariffs thing, which I explained in the Kickstarter update. If for some reason that were to break down for us, we would still attend Origins, and we would probably still run a tournament. And that tournament would probably be a tournament where we would just hand out decks for people to play. It'd be like a free-to-play thing. We might still do that. We have to look into exactly how those tournaments would run at Origins and what is available to us as a company. We're pretty new to the scene at Origins, so this will be our first year attending. And sometimes the way this works for first-year exhibitors at conventions is that they don't always get priority with all of the new stuff that you can do. So if we were to do different events, or we wanted to have, for example, if I wanted to do a presentation, I may or may not be able to do that because it's our first year. Generally, you have to build up some goodwill with these larger conventions, and also it depends on how much money you contribute towards any one given exhibition, or in the expo hall, or your presentation, or whatever, your booth. So larger companies tend to have more of the real estate when it comes to events and tournaments and all sorts of the other things that happen in a convention like Origins. So we'll do the best we can. We will be there, though. It'll be really exciting. Origins is a 4-day long convention, which is fantastic for us. That's 4 days of exposing Fable's End to a new audience in Ohio. We should have some extra people there. If you are interested in helping us out, if you live in the Columbus area or you would like to travel with us to Columbus, let us know. You can DM me in the Discord, or you can leave a message in this YouTube video, or you can put a message in the GM or sorry, the GM. What am I saying? The general chat in the Discord, and just say like, hey, I'm interested in, we can set something up and we can figure it out. We will need at least 2 or 3 people beyond Kwame and myself for Origins, particularly during setup, because I think if all things go correctly, we will have a larger booth setup than we normally have. We're going to add a new element. I won't tell you what it is. It's going to be very fun and very cool, and will definitely look a lot different than what we have already. So in addition to, if you've seen our booths, we have this birchwood forest setup that we've been using for a few years. I've been wanting to introduce a new element. My original idea for conventions was that we were going to do a new setup every year, and that didn't pan out exactly the way I'd like it to, mostly because of time and money. But as the company continues to grow, and as Fable's End starts selling, and we start creating some revenue for Dragonleaf, I think that will be more and more a possibility. My background, for those of you who don't know, in addition to doing game design and illustration, I also do a lot of set building and scenic painting. So that's actually what I've been doing for the past 3 weeks, is building a lot of elements for different pop-up events and for different commercials and sets. And so I have a lot of experience with that. And that is where one of my expertises comes into play with conventions. So I'm very excited to have this next element built for our booth. It should be really cool. I think everyone's going to really like it. And we will reveal a little bit more of that as we get closer to Origins. I'm hoping that everything goes according to plan and that we can have that ready for Origins. If not, we would have it ready by PAX Unplugged at the end of the year. So also for conventions, the other conventions we're looking to attend this year would be Comic-Con in NYC. We have a connection there that we were going to go last year. We decided not to at the last minute because we weren't sure what we were going to be doing there. And also it was a lot of money for us up front, and it's complicated because Comic-Con is a different kind of setup than a lot of the other conventions. So the way it usually works is you pay for your booth. Sometimes you'll submit an application, and that application is basically a description of who you are as a company, the product that you'd be selling or advertising, and what you want to accomplish at that convention. Some conventions are a little more, they're looking for more of a congruence in culture with your company and the convention. Some are more like a first come, first serve, where it's just about getting a booth before anyone else does. And others are much more exclusive and they require different things. So Comic-Con is one of those conventions where it's difficult to get into the NYC Comic-Con convention because you need to have some kind of bona fides or some sort of reputation. Luckily, we have a pretty good looking booth setup, so we were able to send that to Comic-Con to the exhibition coordinator, and they liked what they saw, so they were able to get us in. We decided not to go last year, and instead we will go this year, and hopefully all of those connections that we established last year will allow us to get into Comic-Con and NYC fairly easily. Which will be great for us because we should be on the main floor there, and that will be where we will have either our forest or the new element. We might even have some Fable's End online demos going. We're not sure exactly how that's all going to work out. We have kind of a rough blueprint, but we're not quite there yet. We will also be at Playthrough Convention in Raleigh in North Carolina this year, which is in October. Normally that convention, or traditionally that convention, has been in March, but we will now be attending in October. I believe this was so that the convention could have a larger space because it's growing, which is great news. If you haven't been to Playthrough is a really great, really cool convention. It is a mix of board game and video game experiences. It's really fun. It's a very chill convention. The showrunner is amazing. We love him, and we will be going to that convention as long as we possibly can. It is a little bit out of our way, but we found that it's worth it, and a lot of our audience is there anyway. So it's just like a good experience for Fable's End to make a consistent presence or have a consistent presence at playthrough. And then the final convention that we're planning on this year will be at PAX Unplugged, which is in at the end of November, I believe. It's the last weekend of November in 2025. And PAX Unplugged is usually a really big convention for us. That's the convention that we hit our Kickstarter goal at. It was really, really wonderful. We were very, very thankful for that. And the showrunners are also really great. It's a very good culture. It's a really, really inclusive, really wonderful convention. Fairly large, lots of games, lots of really cool events. We are going to try to push our presence there this year. So what we will probably end up doing is we will probably have another tournament of some kind. If Origins has a tournament for us, we could basically pick up wherever we left off for that tournament and run another tournament at PAX Unplugged. We would really like to do that. We're really big on trying to get a competitive scene going for Fable's End, even if it's just conventions, even if they're just like one-shot tournaments. Which really brings me into the next topic here, which is competitive play for Fable's End. So because we're we're a game that's being introduced into a very crowded market at the moment. There's lots of trading card games out there to choose from. Lots of them are really, really good. And a lot of them have very well-established competitive scenes. For us, being a small company where we basically have, a handful of people working, we have our 2 programmers and then Kwame and myself. And then we basically handle everything between the 4 of us. And that's it. That's our company. So we don't have a PR person. We don't have a logistics person. We don't have like a CFO or a COO. It's just the 2 of us, and we're kind of dividing responsibilities based on what makes sense for us. So for a competitive scene for Fable's End, what we'd like to do is we'd like to have a competitive scene where every time we're at a convention, we would run some kind of important tournament. Now, would that be in the larger scope of something like player points for a pro tour? Probably not right away. I don't think that that's something we'll establish until we have a little bit more revenue flowing through the company, until we get some more investments. Just because it requires a lot of coordination and a lot of staff and a lot of logistics work. Right now, we're just focused on making content and making really, really good cards and making really fun, really synergistic designs. By the time we hit something like PAX Unplugged, for our tournaments or for our conventions, we will have at least 2 expansions out. By the end of the year, the goal is by the end of the year to have our first 4 expansions available to people. I think we can do this. We're well along our way in the 4 expansions. The first expansion is getting really close to being wrapped up. We did end up having to replace one of the cards. Well, we're still working on it. We're trying to figure out what the replacement is, because it proved to be problematic in testing in such a way where we just decided that it was trying to fit a square peg into a circular hole. And every time we were approaching it from all these different angles of like, what if we make it like this? What if we make it like this? What if we make it like this? And generally speaking, my design philosophy is if the design isn't working, then you make a new design. Don't try to take a square peg and fit it in a circular hole. Find the circular peg and put it in a circular hole. Take the square peg and move it to where the square hole is. So we ended up taking that card, and we're probably going to repurpose it into a later expansion, so that we can figure out how to balance it better. And also because there's some other reasons that we can get into once we talk about our first expansion. That's neither here nor there. The point is that by the time we get to the end of the year, by the time we get to a tournament that would be played at a convention at the end of the year, that tournament, you should have at least 4 expansions plus the core set to build decks from. And going through, that's what we call phase 1 in our expansion model. phase one should wrap up by then, and they should be available. We would very much like them to be, because the deck building through phase one, when all of it comes together, is very robust. There's plenty of deck builds. There's plenty of really interesting metas and really interesting strategies. And we think it will create a really dynamic, really complete tournament scene, even though it's a small card pool. And the way that I like to think about the way the card pool works in Fable's End is that we're just eliminating chaff. So rather than having a bunch of commons that no one would use anyway in a tournament setting for constructed play, we just have what I would like to call, in quotations, like the uncommons and the rares. So every card in Fable's End is designed to be able to be played in one deck and be useful in some way. We're really into creating designs that feel unique, that do a unique thing. That's also, if it isn't good in and of itself, it contributes to a larger meta or a larger idea or synergy or strategy in a deck. So I feel pretty confident that by the time tournaments come around with all 4 expansions, those decks will be dynamic enough to feel very different from one another. You will see decks that are running Wolf in one player would be running a Wolf deck, and then another player would be running a Wolf Kraken deck, and those decks would be completely different, and they would do different things. And they would feel different, and the strategies against playing each of those decks would be different, and the sideboard would be different as well. So getting back to how tournaments would work for us for our first year, competitive play is going to look something like each convention we go to, we will hold some kind of important tournament. That tournament will most likely be a constructed format. Constructed meaning each player will bring their own deck. We will have a series of requirements for that deck. We will have depending on the convention, depending on the timing that we can get for that convention, we would have most likely either Swiss or round robin style competitive tournament in which players would get at least 3 games and then move into semifinals or finals. From our experience before, when we run tournaments, it seems like each game is a best of 1 rather than a best of 3. Fable's End is definitely a game that lends itself to I would say 30-minute to 45-minute long game, depending on the experience level of the players, depending on what deck you're running. But it is not like other trading card games where you can bang out a game in 5 minutes. That mostly has to do with how the meta is working currently. I know there are other games where a game can get, there could be a 1TK or an OTK. And Fable's End just doesn't work like that. There just isn't, that's not possible with the system. So games will almost always go to a turn 4 or turn 5, minimum. And even then, you're probably hitting your end game. You're like entering the end game by turn 4. So, that being said, generally speaking, rounds would be like an hour with a best of 1 in each round. I think with a finals potentially having a best of 3, just depending on the schedule, depending on what we have available. And those tournaments would have exclusive prizes that we would bring with us to the tournament. That would be something that you could only obtain through the tournament at that convention. I have a lot of really, really fun prizes that we have in the docket that are being prototyped, and I think they're going to be really exciting. I think people will really appreciate them. We're trying to do something with our prize packages that are more substantive than just getting like a card. There would be something beyond cards. I think we would have some prize foils for sure, and probably some participation foils. In addition, we would also have some nice little like side quality of life gizmos that you could use with your play experience, including like game mats or sleeves or some other things that I won't spoil yet. But generally speaking, that's kind of how our tournaments would work in the first year for Fable's End until we grow our company a little bit more. And then Kwame and I have a plan, like a larger plan for competitive play moving forward after that. And that competitive play might, it just depends on like where we can get our Fable's End communities established. So depending on where the community is built, we would have probably local tournaments that we could have with prize pools. But for the first year and generally moving forward, our important tournaments would be handled at conventions because that's the place where everyone could come together. We would definitely have them set up in such a way where beginners are welcome. You know, anyone could participate as long as they're adhering to the rules of the deck building. Which, one thing I'd like to do is I'd like to have, for constructed play, have it set up in such a way where players could just take a core set deck, bring that into a tournament and play, and not get blown out if they know how to play. If they're good enough, if they have enough skill, they could jump into a tournament and with a just straight up Scorpion deck or a straight up Kraken deck and do okay. Like they wouldn't just get completely bodied. So, that's part of the plan for the year. That's a little bit of the plan for the year in terms of conventions and a little bit of insight into our competitive play. So, also in terms of, I want to talk a little bit about our expansion plan because I kind of dance around it, but I never quite explain it in full. So the way our expansion system is working currently is that rather than buying a booster pack that has a randomized set of cards in it with specific rarities, like a trading card game, our expandable model will sell cards in a deck. And we have different names for different decks because they fulfill different purposes. So basically we have 3 different categories of expansion packs. We have what I call a battle pack. The battle pack is basically just it's a collection of cards where every kingdom that's currently in the game gets a handful of new cards. I would say between 3 and 5. So Wolf would get 3 to 5 cards. Scorpion would get 3 to 5. Kraken would get 3 to 5. Raven would get 3 to 5. Our other 2 kingdoms might get 3 to 5. That's all bundled together in one box. Each of those cards has 5 copies, so that you have the maximum amount of copies needed to play. And you would buy that deck for, however much it would be. Could be between $15 to $20. Just depends on how many cards we decide to put in that battle pack. You would buy that, and you would only need to buy it once. And each of those cards is in there with a specific purpose, like I said earlier, that the designs are such that every card in that pack has a home in at least one deck. It serves a purpose somewhere. And we are doing everything we can to make that the case so that no card really feels like it's truly just chaff. It's all worthwhile. Now, that doesn't mean that every card in that pack is going to appeal to every single person. You will definitely have favorites, but we're trying to cast a wider net with a battle pack that sort of allows players to purchase it, to add that to their collection, to fill out their collection, and there's at least 1 or 2 cards in there that you as a player will enjoy. And we are trying to explore with the battle packs, like, here's these one-off designs that don't really fit anywhere, but they're really fun, and they really fit. They expand the game in mechanically, while also giving a little bit more flavor into the game. But they don't necessarily fit more with our themed expansions. So that's a battle pack. Now, in addition to battle packs, we also have what I'm calling a reinforcement pack. That name may change. I think we're probably going to end up changing it to something like a theme deck, or a theme pack, or a story pack. But right now they're called reinforcement packs. The reason that they're called reinforcement packs is because they focus on one kingdom. The way that model is currently working is that those reinforcement packs are actually fully playable decks that have what I call outsider cards in them. So if it's a Raven pack, you would get a full playable Raven deck that's entirely new, entirely separate from the core set. All the cards in there are not core set cards. All the chapters, all the units. We would even have special shields in there that are representative of whatever is going on in that deck. And in addition, you would have one card that belongs to all of the other kingdoms. These are called outsider cards. So if it's a Raven deck, you would have one card for Wolf, one card for Kraken, one card for Scorpion, one card for the other two kingdoms, and you would get 5 copies of each of those outsider cards. Now, the way that we're currently designing them is that we're taking those 5 outsider cards and we're theming them with the deck. So I'll give you, I'm going to try to think of an example that would work for. Let's say that you had a deck that was centered around something like the Wizard of Oz. Okay? Now, the kingdom would be, the playable deck would be of one kingdom, and that would be the Wizard of Oz, wherever do we decide to drop Wizard of Oz. Let's say it's a Wolf Kingdom. Now, if you put Wizard of Oz and Wolf, I'm not saying we're going to do this, I'm just using this as an example, so if anyone's listening to this and they're like, Wizard of Oz doesn't belong in Wolf, what are you doing? This is just an example. If we take Wizard of Oz and we put it into a Wolf reinforcement pack, there would be a Kraken, Raven, Scorpion, and the other two kingdoms each would have a card that would be a Wizard of Oz card, but it would be something that would make sense in those other kingdoms. So, like the Wicked Witch of the West might belong in the Raven Kingdom. So we make her the outsider Raven card. But the rest of the deck would be the Wolf cards that work for the Wizard of Oz. You have like the Munchkins, you have Dorothy, you have the Scarecrow, you have Lion, the Cowardly Lion, you have the Wicked Witch, or the Glenda, all that stuff. And the way that we're building these expansions with reinforcement packs is that there is a way to build decks with them, even within themselves. So you could just buy that one reinforcement pack, have the fully playable deck, and all the outsider cards would be able to be included in that deck through deck building rules, of course, because we will have a mechanism by which you will be able to cheat them then. I won't cover all of that because that's a phase 2 thing, and I don't want to get into phase 2 too much without having more of that ready for you all to see, because we're kind of like in the middle of the skeleton of phase 2. We have a lot of design done for it. There's a lot of cards designed already. There's a lot of, I'd say, of the 6 reinforcement packs, 4 are well along their way. And what we have so far is so cool. It's so exciting. It's going to be... Phase 1 is great because Phase 1 expands the core set, and Phase 1 is all about kind of taking the game and fleshing it out a little bit more, giving you more of a foundation for the gameplay. So it's giving you lots of like card designs and new stuff, and new keywords, new mechanisms by which you can build a deck around. Phase 2 is really where the game starts singing. And it's where the deck, especially the way these reinforcement packs are designed, to my knowledge, other games don't do this. If you bought a starter deck with another game, you'd get a booster pack, and that booster pack would theoretically be cards that you could potentially deck build with. But a booster pack is not super substantial in terms of deck building because it's randomized. So you may not get cards. You may get one card that's useful, and it may not even be that good. The reinforcement packs are designed in such a way where every one of those outsider cards in the Wolf reinforcement pack, the Raven, Scorpion, Kraken, and blank cards are all designed to work within that deck. And they're designed to work with it in such a way where if you want to push the deck in a certain direction, then you would include the Scorpion cards. But if you want to push the deck in a different direction, then you would include the Kraken cards, and so on and so forth. So it's taking one deck and giving you deck building options immediately, in a way that's fluid, that is not, it's imperfect, so it's not as ideal as you would like, because now you can incorporate that in with the rest of the Fable's End collection, including Phase 1 and the core sets. So those will give you an even better deck building experience, but you will have an experience to deck build immediately with that pack. You can just buy that reinforcement pack, have a playable deck immediately out the gate, and then be able to start building that deck in different directions. As a concept, that we think that's really, really cool. In theory, it is exciting. In practice, it works. It is working really, really well in our testing, and it's really fun. So the final category for expansions is what I would call a premiere set. Now, the premiere set is where we're getting into phase 3 of expansion. So phase 3 is the sort of big ideas set of expansions or series of expansions. And phase 2 will really inform how phase 3 is going to work. We have cards designed for phase 3. We have some of the concept designs. We have some of the mechanics designed for it. But we need to kind of flesh out phase 2 to see how phase 2 is going to work before we kind of flesh out how phase 3. Because most of how phase 3 is going to work is just dependent upon what makes the most sense for our packaging. Because we might start selling our expansions and realize, like, actually there's a better way to do this. And so because phase 3 is such big ideas, and phase 3 is really going to hit some ideas that people are really excited about and people are really looking for. Not that there isn't anything else to be excited about. I mean, all of this is exciting. It's just we know that phase 3 is going to be where players are really their eyes are going to perk up. Their ears and their eyes will perk when they hear about what's going on in phase 3. So we still have to figure out exactly how to package that. We have a lot of different ideas, but in terms of design, there's some preliminary exploratory design for all of those sets in phase 3. And we will probably borrow a lot of ideas from phase 2 in terms of the like reinforcement pack model that we will apply, because I think the reinforcement pack model is going to be very, very successful. It is going to be really, really cool. I'm really excited about it. It does a lot of things for the game, and it does a lot of things for players who are looking to invest in Fable's End but aren't sure how much money they want to invest in it, and they want something that they can use right away, but also gives them some options. And I think that that's a very exciting prospect for the future of Fable's End and our expansions. So I know I've been rambling on for like 30 minutes here, and I wanted to touch on a few things, and I know that it was just me today because my work schedule has not allowed me to have free time with anyone else. We do have other playtesters that we need to introduce you to, some more people. I would like to have some of our programmers on again so we can have another Fable's End session, Fable's End online session. And today was just a day where, because of my work schedule and everyone else's work schedule, there was no coordination to happen before Tuesday, before tomorrow, before we premiere any more of our Fable Talk episodes. So it's just me. I hope this was somewhat useful to all of you. I hope that it was somewhat informative. And we will be back next week. I will give more updates about the project. I will give more updates about what's going to happen in the next month or so. And for those of you that backed us on Kickstarter, stay tuned. There's more exciting stuff coming. We've got some relevant information for you. So stick with us. But until then, the balcony is closed. Wait, no, I will talk to you soon. Okay, bye.